Welcome to McLean Racing. In this video we are going to be comparing the 4 choices for the GTE class cars in iRacing's IMSA series as of Season 1, 2020. The BMW M8, the Ferrari 488, the Ford GT, and the Porsche RSR. If you are considering the IMSA GTE class for this season and want to know which one's right for you, hopefully this video will help you make that decision. I've been on iRacing for about 9 months and have 2.7k iRating. I've driven the MX-5, Skippy, fixed Ferrari 488, and most recently a full IMSA series in the Merc GT3 where I placed 25th overall and first in Division 3. Before these tests, I haven't driven any of the GTE cars. I should get the disclaimer out of the way early. Driving is very subjective. I would be a fool to think that I could give a completely partial and objective review of these cars, so I'm not going to try. This video's objective is to find the best GTE that fits my driving style and preferences. I'll try my best to give as many universal truths as possible and phrase my observation in a way that others can deduce which car is best for them. For example, I will avoid blanket statements like the Ford is difficult to control and instead say the Ford necessitates the most fluid inputs in order to attack the corners. My method. As with any choice, being able to prioritize what's important is key. For me, the following 3 attributes are my top priorities in order. 1. Overall drivability and feel. 2. Consistency. And 3. Training instruction. Overall feel will be the most subjective of the 3. It will be based on the confidence and excitement of driving a car and will be comprised of many idiosyncrasies that are occurring subconsciously and difficult to properly articulate. Conversely, drivability will be discussed easily in 5 main categories: braking, cornering, stability, top speed, and additional car features. Consistency will be attained from a 15-lap stint at a Torodromo Jose Carlos pace. For each of the GTEs, I will get accustomed to the car for 30 minutes, stop and watch the VRS training instruction, then apply the information by driving for another 30 minutes. Once I have done this for each of the 4 cars, I will randomly order the cars, do a 15-lap stint, then compare each car's average 10 laps after throwing out the worst 3 and best 2. The 3 major data points are 1. Fastest lap, 2. Average lap, and 3. Standard deviation, or how close each of the laps are to the average. Finally, I will consider the training instruction from VRS. I spent a lot of my time learning a track using their instruction, lap analysis tools, and telemetry, so having instruction that clicks well with me will go a long way. 3 of the cars are being driven by a Dutch driver by the name of Mac Beckham, who has an iRating of 9.7k, so I don't believe there will be much of a difference here. The odd man out is the Ford GT, instructed by Porsche Esports Super Cup champion Josh Rogers. I should note that I'm not in any way affiliated with the service and I pay full price for my subscription. Each of the cards will be using the VRS setup file from week 1 of Season 1 2020, with the track time and weather conditions exactly the same for each stint. First up is the BMW. This is a very solid car. It feels the most stable of the bunch, which allows the driver to attack corners that typically unbalance the car. The BMW can deal best with corners like the bottom of the Senna S, the high-speed turns at 6 and 7, and the tight turn at 9. Braking can be unforgiving if not careful. Going over the limit can get it sideways quick. The car feels big. Unlike the Ferrari and Porsche, turning takes effort and apexes can be missed if not executed properly. Applying smooth inputs can get this car lapping quickly. Next is the Ferrari. This is the most easily drivable car. The brakes are easy to control and the Ferrari reacts quickly to steering inputs. It feels light and nimble. It's not hard to go quick, but unfortunately there's a major problem. It's boring. Besides instability in fast corners that can induce understeer like the bottom of the Senna S or oversteer on high-speed corners like 6 and 7, the Ferrari is bland. It's a perfect introduction to a GT car of any kind. It will go far teaching you the basics of driving lines, trail braking, etc., and won't kill you if you make slight mistakes, but at some point, you gotta move on. The Porsche RSR. This is the next level Ferrari. It has all the bells and whistles. As with the rest of the GTEs, the RSR has a lockup indicator, but it also has traction control indicators, a monstrous rear view screen, and a wheel with 4 display pages. 4. I fell in love with this car immediately. It taught me so much in so little time, and I could completely understand what the car was doing and what the car wanted me to do. It feels light and nimble like the Ferrari. It's controllable, and braking is true to its inputs. I really needed to concentrate on trail braking because it will lock up easily if done wrong. The force feedback is very different here. It goes incredibly light during understeer, which adds to the vast information the car provides. This car loves to be jerked around at low speeds, and it's exciting and raw. I completely understand why people love driving this car. Last is the Ford GT. This car is different. It's definitely the hardest to control, it feels heavy, and the body roll is large. Controlling and manipulating the GT takes very smooth and accurate inputs. Any jerkiness will punish you greatly, but when done well, I suspect it's the most rewarding. Unfortunately, in the 2 hours I spent with this beast, I never got it right. There will be a time in my future that I'll understand this car, and I look forward to the day that I can drive this car well, but it won't be this season. I want to emphasize the seemingly negative review of the GT is completely on my lack of driving prowess and not the car. In fact, this could be considered the best car because it makes the best drivers drive at their best. I'm assuming this is the reason why Max Verstappen chose this car. It must be extremely fun to be able to completely control this car with the slightest of inputs, like a Stradivarius in the hands of a world-class violinist. One day, GT. One day. The results. First, let's go over the Ferrari and the Ford. The Ferrari is a great choice for the beginner. You'll get up to speed and be competitive quickly. In my testing, it was the second fastest in both the fastest lap at a 1:28.713 and an average lap of 1:28 984. But surprisingly, it had the second worst standard deviation at 0.177 seconds. This means that 68% of the time, I will lap somewhere between 177 thousandths of a second above or below the average of 128,984. This will be a solid choice if I were risk adverse, if I were happy with my current skill level and I didn't want to push hard to improve, but I do, so this one's a pass for me. The Ford is above my skill level and will be my choice sometime in the future. Trying to learn the minutiae of such a complex car would be frustrating and infuriating. Needless to say, this one had the worst times of the lot. My fastest lap was a 128,892, 2/10 slower than the Ferrari, and an average lap time of 129,471, almost a full half second slower, with a standard deviation of over a quarter second. So I was worse than slow. I was slow and inconsistent. The Ford will be on the back burner for this season, with hopes that I'll someday acquire the skill needed to get it to go fast. Which leaves us to the final two, the BMW and the Porsche. This is where things get interesting. If the Ferrari is for beginners and the Ford is for the masters, the BMW and the Porsche are for the masses. The BMW is a solid choice. It's a big car that can corner well. It has a weird looking wheel and a large rear view screen. At first, I wasn't wowed, nor was I disappointed. My times weren't that great, but weren't that bad, and I could handle the car well, but not as good as the Porsche or the Ferrari. It was lackluster, uninspiring. Then things got better. I started to understand. My lap times improved, and I started to gain respect and excitement for the car. It ended up being the fastest of the bunch. My fastest time was a 128,706. Only 7 thousandths faster than the Ferrari. My average was a 128,924, 6 hundredths faster than the Ferrari. The most telling though is the standard deviation at 123 thousandths, which means I'll be within a quarter of a second of my average 68% of the time. It's a fast and consistent car, and a great car. So where does that leave the Porsche? The Porsche and I clicked from the start. I understood it, although it didn't necessarily understand me. It was blunt in telling me what it wants with clear indication of what it's doing, so it was easy to adjust how I was driving. The first test went great. The optimum time was by far the fastest at a 128.1, and it was a pleasure to drive. My face hurt from smiling so much when I was done. But something went wrong. This was the last car to go through the testing and my mind was already made up. All it had to do was meet my expectations, but it didn't. It got the worst fastest lap of a 128,892, 2/10 slower than the BMW and the Ferrari, and it got the second worst average time of 129,402, almost a half second slower than the BMW. What happened? Things were going so well. I couldn't believe it, so I did another 15 laps. I improved, but not by much. I was still slower than the BMW and the Ferrari for the fastest lap, and the average lap was still 3/10 slower than the BMW, with the standard deviation somewhere between the BMW and the Ferrari. I was let down. I was excited that my mind was made up after the initial testing, and I hyped myself up about driving it with all of its cool features, but how could I justify driving such a slow car? Maybe I'm tired, I thought. The Porsche was the last test after all. I've been going for hours at this point and my mind must have given up. So I jumped in the BMW to test my theory. If I drop my times in the BMW like I did in the Porsche, then the Porsche must still be the right choice, right? Well, this happened. So there you have it. The choice is made. Here's my thoughts if you're picking a GT for yourself. 1. If you've never driven a GT type car before, start with the Ferrari. You'll get a head around how it handles, and there's no better template than the 488. 2. If you're jumping from a GT3 class car up to the GTEs, go with either the BMW or the Porsche. I believe the Porsche was victim to a bad setup. I changed the setup from the initial testing to the 15-lap stint with an updated setup for this season, and I believe the setup didn't click as well as the one from the previous season. Honestly, I think I'll probably jump between the Porsche and the BMW during the season and test them both on each new track. They are two different beasts with the same heart. Both will do well for the driver who's been driving GTs for a season or two. 3. If you're the type that does well diving right into the deep end, the Ford might be right for you. It's much different from the others, which explains why there's a different instructor from VRS presenting the videos. And I suspect this will give the biggest reward if you stick with it until you get it right. If this video helped you out, please click the like button below. I'll be releasing a video every week of the new season, so if you like gameplay, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell to be notified when each new race is posted. Until next time, cheers.